Just last weekend, my friend Josiah from National Coasters and I stupidly flew across the country from California to Georgia and back for one day at a Six Flags park. Not even to mention the fact that my flight was an overnight red-eye with a 4.5-hour layover in Denver, Colorado. If you guys are interested in hearing more about that, go ahead and check out the vlog that should have came out 2 days prior to this video's release. Anyways, the way this trip came to be was when Six Flags sent us media invitations to become some of the first riders of the season on their new and improved Riddler Mindbender. Of course, how can we turn this down, especially since it was just another one of the dozen reasons we had already wanted to head out to this park. During our stay, we were fortunate enough to experience 9 out of the park's 11 roller coasters, and fortunately we didn't miss out on anything too significant. The rides we missed were Blue Hawk, the Vekoma Looper that has a poor reputation in the coaster community, and Joker Funhouse Coaster, which is the fairly unique kiddie coaster but still a kid's ride nonetheless. For those of you wondering how this video is a top 10 list as seen in the title and not a top 9, well, it's not. I just think the number 10 looks better than a 9, so that's literally the only reason. Though if you want my genuine opinion on where Blue Hawk would have placed, I'm guessing it would have been somewhere between 8 and 9 on the list. With that being said, I got to write 9 other fantastic coasters that I will be ranking from worst to best in this video. As always, take into consideration that this is all my personal opinion, and that if you'd like to show your support, liking the video and subscribing to the channel would really help me out. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the list. These are the top 9 roller coasters that I rode at Six Flags over Georgia. Number 9, Dahlonega Mine Train. My lowest ranked coaster on the list is none other than a 1967 Aerodynamics Mine Train. Sure, it's a classic, sure it's good to see that this aero is still around, but honestly guys, this is towards the bottom of my Mine Train credits without question. None of the layout was remotely noteworthy with the exception of the underground drop at the end of the ride. The rest is a janky mess of track going every which way, and it really just doesn't do anything. Unless you're a younger guest or credit seeker, I can't say I recommend this ride all too much. Truth be told, there are many other rides that are worth your time far more than this one in this park. Number 8, Riddler Mindbender. Despite the fact that this ride was technically the reason for my visit this year, I can't really say it blew me out of the water. Now, with that said, I don't think it's really meant to blow you out of the water. The ride originally opened in 1978 and just this year reopened after a nearly 2-year-long refurbishment. This included new trains, new lift motors, new track pieces, a new control system, and a fresh new coat of paint. Unfortunately, when I rode Mindbender for the first official train of the season, the ride was trimming quite a bit. But because the ride isn't meant to be relentless, I wasn't too devastated by it. And even with these hurdles, you can expect some traditionally awesome Schwarzkopf positive Gs in the vertical loops and valleys. My favorite thing about the ride, however, is easily the layout. The terrain it's built around and the way the second half is in a lower elevation than the first half is really neat to me. So currently, Mindbender sits as my number 3 Schwarzkopf coaster I've ridden and is a pretty solid coaster all around, but didn't exactly impress me like I was expecting. Number 7, Georgia Scorcher. This is the point in the list where I struggle to decide on any rankings up to spot number 4. All of these rides are stupidly close together in quality, and having Georgia Scorcher at 7 should do nothing but speak to the volume of this park's coaster lineup. I was actually pleasantly surprised by this ride, even though it is one of the few stand-up coasters that doesn't receive a boatload of hate. I was able to make my one ride a back row ride experience, which is always my go-to on these stand-up coasters for their leg-numbing intensity. Sure enough, Georgia Scorcher had plenty of that, and much to my surprise, it actually had some pretty decent airtime moments too. To feel a sensation like that on a B&M stand-up coaster is super unique and cannot really be described to any of you who haven't ridden this ride. So as much as I feel bad for putting this coaster towards the bottom of the list, I think it's a fairly well-rounded coaster with good forces, good pacing, and good overall sensations. Number 6, Daredevil Dive. Another coaster that pleasantly surprised me was Six Flags' attempt at a large-scale Gerstlauer coaster. While it may not compare to the Eurofighters over in Europe, I will say that it was a super fun ride with a lot going for it. For starters, this is easily one of the smoothest thrill coasters I've ever been on. I thought it was super comfortable in that regard and additionally had lap bars versus over-the-shoulder restraints, which is always a huge plus. Onto the layout, while the drop was one of the less impressive Gerstlauer drops I've experienced, it was still loads of fun, but following the drop is where the fun really begins. From here to the end, you have some fun, quirky elements that aren't super intense but flow really well together. That, more than anything else, is probably what I like the most about Daredevil Dive. For those of you who aren't expecting much from this ride, which I'm sure is a decent chunk of you guys, take my word for it when I say you should ramp up your expectations a bit. This was a really fun coaster. Number 5, Superman Ultimate Flight. Obviously, you guys all know that B&M Flyers are some of my guilty pleasure coaster experiences by now. Something about the sensation of flight, graceful nature of most of the inversions, and the bone-crushing pretzel loop work together like peas in a pod to me. And add that in with a genuine terrain layout, and this ride gets even better. I had ridden through this layout before at Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey, but Georgia's had many low-to-the-ground sections and even a tunnel towards the end of the ride. Because you are in the aforementioned flying sensation, this increases the overall sense of speed and can even act as somewhat of a near miss. For more than one reason, I think this is a super enjoyable ride, and although it took me 4 breakdowns and 1 train ops to get on, I'm glad it was open nonetheless. Number 4, Great American Scream Machine. One of the more bipolar coasters in the Six Flags chain is a ride that looks like it's horribly maintained, poorly taken care of, uncomfortable beyond proportions, and for the most part, it is. But something about the out-of-control nature and endless series of airtime on this ride left me wanting more. Tied with Twisted Cyclone, I think Great American Scream Machine was the coaster I rode the second most amount of times in my visit. My friend Josiah and I couldn't stop laughing when we got off of this ride because we think it's the most ridiculous thing ever. But because of its sheer aggression and intensity for a classic wood coaster, I love this ride to pieces. As much as I am hesitant given the lack of popularity and difficulty to maintain, I hope this coaster sticks around for the long run. Number 3, Batman the Ride. For the longest time, I had heard over and over again that this was the best Batman clone out there, and after riding in just the front, I was floored. Try again in the back row this time, and I was even more shook. You see, I'm used to riding the one at Magic Mountain, which is already insane, and in my opinion, the second best Batman clone out there. But to have a replica of that ride be somehow more intense and more whippy blew me out of the water. It feels almost detrimental to your health how many positive Gs this incredibly compact invert pulls. And combine that with the aggressive whip and pacing, you've got a genuinely elite invert. It may be on the smaller scale relative to many others, but few inverts maintain their speed and blaze through their layouts better than this one. Number 2, Twisted Cyclone. I know for many, this ride is the number 1 ride in the park, and where I didn't think it was all too close, I can still recognize how spectacular this layout is. Compared to many other RMC iBox coasters, I can't say I was super impressed by this ride. But if this were the only hybrid design that they had done, of course I'd be mind blown. This coaster still has some elite ejector airtime moments and some rather unique elements as well. Just look at the reverse cobra roll or the beyond 90-degree wave turn, which is the best element on the ride by the way. For being as tiny as it is, there's no denying that Twisted Cyclone packs one hell of a punch. But to be honest, few moments on this coaster left a lasting impression on me because you can find many of the same quality stuff on other rides of its kind. It is also a super short ride too, so that doesn't help its case. But in conclusion, I still think this is an excellent ride with some outright violent moments. None of this is really hate as it is a comparison, so Twisted Cyclone is still an awesome coaster. Number 1, Goliath. My 400th roller coaster credit and my favorite ride in the park caught me by surprise not a little bit, but a lot. I had heard before that this was a top tier B&M hyper layout and didn't know much about it, so I was just blown away by the barrage of airtime and positive Gs that Goliath had to offer. Every single camelback on this ride had incredible sustained floater airtime that was on par with what you can find on my previous top 2 B&M hypercoasters, Mako at SeaWorld Orlando and Behemoth at Canada's Wonderland. But what had Goliath over the edge of both of those rides was the sheer quantity of airtime hills. Minus the drop, I believe there are 7 airtime points on this ride versus the 4 or 5 on Mako and Behemoth. And even better, the last few hills on Goliath are loaded with sustained ejector airtime rather than floater, and I am a firm believer that this is the only B&M in the world with straight up ejector. Now if this wasn't enough, you also have one of my favorite turnarounds on any coaster with that downwards double helix funnel. Rising up into this element, you get some great floater airtime per usual, and declining it, you begin to gray out as you are forced to handle some insane positive Gs. If I hadn't made it clear enough, Goliath is my new favorite B&M hypercoaster. I was blown away by this ride, and I think the biggest reason as to why was its sheer aggression. Other B&M hypers don't really try to kill you in sections like Goliath does, and instead are on the more graceful side like Mako. So I know it's hard to believe, but if my review wasn't enough, the stats and specs do nothing but back up my opinion. I urge you all to get it to this park and ride Goliath whenever you have the chance because it is my second favorite B&M ever now and a top 25 coaster out of over 400 total coaster credits. Genuinely a fantastic, insane ride. I'll be honest, that was probably one of the more difficult lists I've had to decide on. All of the coasters from 8 to 3 are genuinely pretty close together all things considered. But with that being said, I hope that goes to show how impressive and well-rounded this park's coaster lineup is. I'd love to see in the comments also some of your favorite coasters in the park and how you'd rank them up against each other. As well as that, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to show your support. But with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed and I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.